Now in a podcast format, at least it is easier to consume and it's really just focused on a niche topic, like straight to the point and then move on to the next one. But the real goal was like super actionable insights. You know what you're going to get when you read the title. And then in less than 15, 20 minutes, you can hopefully improve your processes or your strategic planning in some way.
Hey, I'm Corrina.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Direct, a podcast we created to showcase the creativity and hard work of go-to-market teams everywhere.
We're here to share the stories and experiences of the hardworking, passionate individuals who make up go-to-market teams, the ones who truly make the magic happen.
Taylor and I have been fortunate enough to work side by side on some incredible projects together, and now we want to put a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind some of the best go-to-market campaigns out there.
In each episode, you'll hear from individual contributors who have gone above and beyond to make a difference. They'll share their challenges, victories, and the lessons they've learned along the way, all to help you unlock the next step in your career. Get ready to be inspired, learn something new, maybe even share a laugh or two.
Welcome to Direct. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Direct. I am honored, as always, to be joined by my fabulous, amazingly talented co-host, Taylor Young. Taylor, hi, welcome back.
Hi, it's great to be back.
Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Courtney Duprey, who is a video producer turned content marketer. And after graduating with her video production degree, she started her career in editing videos for an IT training company. I can imagine how much fun that probably was. After a few years, she noticed her passion shifting towards the field of content marketing, where she was able to leverage her video skills and broaden her experience with content writing and social media management. And so now she currently runs social for Insightly CRM while also managing and producing their video series and podcast Closing Time. But when she's not working, she's listening to T-Swift and practicing her hula hooping skills or catching up on the latest Formula One race, which was a big surprise for us to find out that Courtney actually used to competitively go-kart race when she was younger. And you attribute that to your competitive nature, which me and Taylor are incredibly competitive and proud to be so.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. How did you get into that?
So we're from a small town in Central Florida, very country, like grew up four-wheel riding, trail riding. So go-karting honestly wasn't that far out of the realm of possibilities as like a hobby for my family and I on Friday nights. So yeah, my dad, my little brother, and myself, we all had our go-karts. We would go out to the track on Friday nights. Our families and friends would join us. We'd have like barbecues, make it a whole event. And I probably raced since I was 8 or 9 until I was 14 or 15. And the real competition was between my little brother and I. He was younger, so he was much lighter than me, which means he went faster.
Oh, that's not
that
fair.
Was not fair. Not at
all. We need weight classes.
Exactly.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And yeah, we've got a wealth of experience to chat with you about today. So excited to dive in. But first, I'm going to pass it over to Taylor, who has a special question for you. If you've listened to our podcast before, you've likely heard it. But I'll pass over to Taylor to kick us off.
Yeah, so excited to hear so much about the specific project you've brought to us today. But before we start, the question we always ask is, if you had a magic wand, and you could use that magic wand to change anything about your role, about content or video production in general, or even something personal, what would you use that magic wand for?
Well, I absolutely love this question. And I have watched a few episodes, so I was a little I was ready for it. But out of my few options that I had, I think that the wand that I would wave, it would give people who are early in their career, kind of like I was a few years ago, just this like little confidence booster. So maybe if they're working at a company where they're not super happy, or they want to do this career change, or maybe they want to like ask for a raise or a promotion that they feel like they deserve, they'd have this like little boost of confidence to do it and like go after it. I mean, you know, people can tell us all day that we're capable and we're doing great, but like we really need to believe it. And that's something that doesn't really come naturally for a lot of us, especially when we're at like our first or second job post-graduation, or our first like career job that's not, I don't know, serving tables or something like that. And it can be scary. Like change is really scary. Imposter syndrome is really real. it affected me pretty seriously for a few years there. And I'm very grateful at Insightly. Like our culture is very much so like recognition is a priority for all levels of management. And unfortunately, that's just not the case for a lot of companies. So I'd really like, being comfortable and embracing change and knowing my worth was a really huge thing for me. It changed the trajectory of my career. And I feel like my magic wand might catalyze that for other people, which would be a great thing.
I love that answer. And we will come back to it at the end because I know Corrina and I are both just bursting with conversation around that specific topic. But as we get into it, I want to ask you to tell the listeners a little bit about this incredible project you've done with Insightly, which is the Closing Time podcast. If anyone listening doesn't know, Courtney is the behind the scenes magic of that podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, how the podcast got started, how you got into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I say if I had a business baby, it would be Closing Time. So I pretty much do everything other than the host of Closing Time helps source guests. And of course they're on camera, but everything behind the scenes, I am in full control over. And whenever I started at Insightly a little over a year ago, my manager, Val, and then our CMO were trying to brainstorm ideas for us to try to differentiate ourselves. I'm sure most people who are listening are familiar with CRM and the incredibly competitive marketplace for which we live. So just trying to like differentiate ourselves in a way. And I mean, most SaaS companies are trying to do that now. And most businesses and most brands have a podcast. And we were trying to differentiate with a video series, like very high quality video first series that we could just provide value, actionable tips to people in our ICP, which would be like go-to-market leaders across sales, marketing, and customer success, and like help them in their daily work or strategic planning. But we didn't want something that was like promotional. We wanted it to be informational first and not really mention CRM that much. We only have a few episodes that even talked on the CRM topic. But, I really feel like the most successful podcasts, they're based on a topic or a selection of topics, not a product. And we wanted this to be not necessarily for lead gen purposes, but just very top of the funnel, building brand awareness slowly over time and just getting Insightly's name out there and in front of people who have probably never heard of us. But we also wanted it to be like an interview first podcast, a value based podcast or video series. Sorry, podcast came later, but video series. And we wanted the voice of the series to be the people who we interviewed. So it wasn't necessarily the voice of Insightly or the voice of our CSO, CMO, or director of content marketing who are the hosts. It was the voice of the people who we interviewed. So we tried to go after, we first asked our sales team, like, hey, who are people on LinkedIn who you enjoy consuming content from? Who do you think have good opinions and like a good following, and because essentially our salespeople are who we're trying to go after and who we're trying to really appeal to. And they recommended a group of a few people to start with. And we asked them, we did end up compensating our first few guests just so we could get the ball rolling. And we recorded 6 episodes with each of our 4 guests, which was Todd Capone, Sam McKenna, Jay Bear, and Amy Volis. They are awesome people on LinkedIn. If you haven't followed them, give them a follow. And we really use them as our starting point to just get the show in front of people and get the ball rolling.
I love that you called that out. Did you find that you needed to do that, or did you kind of just preemptively know, or did it come up in conversations when trying to reach out to guests? Like, were you guys struggling at first? The need to compensate. I'm just curious how that came about.
We knew originally, we want people who have a really strong voice in the industry, and we want people who have a following, and, their time is very important. And we were asking quite a bit of them. We're like, hey, help us with the proof of concept of this video series and talk about these very specific niche topics. And we also want you to do like 6 episodes. So we knew that, to really compensate them for their time and how valuable they are, that we would want to offer them some sort of compensation to get started. And it worked out really well because also we worked into that compensation package. You have to post about the episode after it's out. So I would edit together short 90 to 2-3 minute clips from the videos. And I would give that to them so that they would have a piece of engaging content to use to promote the episode versus just sharing out the link or saying like, hey, check this out. So that really helped like boost engagement on their posts. And they were also able to use it as like a part of their social content strategy as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that definitely makes sense. Yeah. 6-part series. I mean, content across all those guests. I mean, that is like I would say you're good for the year, if not then some.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. So how did you initially find that? Like, what were the metrics you were using, as we talked about, to show like your proof of concept is actually working? And how long did it take to like show substantial results or KPIs? What were you looking at there to prove that out?
Yeah. So how we measure success today is different than when we first started and different than it was when we were 6 months ago. So our biggest win is when one of those guest posts that we talk about gets good engagement. Like there's valuable, insightful conversation happening in the comments. I, as Insightly, can hop in and engage in conversation and keep the convo flowing. And I mean, because the people who are commenting and active on LinkedIn, like those are really the people that we want to know that we exist. So, I mean, some of their posts would have upwards of 200 comments and and of course, these people, those 4 luminaries that I just said, they're so active on LinkedIn. So they're responding to comments and it's just like a really great conversation that's happening. So that was at first like, hey, let's just hope that these social posts get good engagement. And then we can say, okay, at least people are becoming aware of who we are and that we have this show. And we did measure hard metrics at first because we're like, let's give this a shot. So I had this master Excel sheet and I would track each episode's YouTube views. I would also track the LinkedIn posts. So Insightly would make a post, the guest would make a post, and then whoever was hosting that episode would make a post. So I would track all 3 of those different posts, the video views, the minutes watched, the impressions, the whole shebang. And after 25-ish episodes, we tracked about 500,000 organic impressions. And that was across YouTube and LinkedIn. And then we had like 2,500 reactions. Our videos were viewed by 47,000 plus users for a total of 17,000 minutes. And that was like, okay, all we're doing is working, but me going out and having to pull that data, like emailing the guests, hey, can you send me a screenshot of what your analytics look like on this post, and doing the same with our hosts. Frankly, it just took a crap ton of time, like hours a week. And after we kind of proved that initial success that way, then we kind of backed off of the hard metrics. And, and also like brand awareness is hard to measure. Their attributions models don't pick it up. I'm just a one-man band. So it was just a lot of work. So now we have uploaded each episode. We have a podcast now. So about 6 months in, we started uploading the episodes to a podcast platform so that we could kind of adapt to the viewers who would prefer to listen rather than watch. So we have podcast downloads that we can measure now. And we also have episode landing pages, which we didn't have at first. We didn't have the front end developer bandwidth on our team to build us out a template in WordPress. So we were kind of just working with what we had. And now that we have these great fully optimized landing pages, we're getting SEO from them. Some of the pages are our top 10 performance pages on our website. So they're picking up traction now. And that's even from like older episodes from the very beginning. So we're really just like, brand awareness, it's hard to measure, but we're measuring traffic to the web pages and then podcast downloads currently.
That is such an incredible group of concepts that you just covered, all the way from repurposing the content, influencer marketing. But you did decide, as you mentioned, 6 months later, to go from the highly produced paid influencer video into podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what initiated that decision?
Yeah, so we were really hoping that so at first, we would pick up traction from having those really influencer type guests on the show. And then that would be like the initial traction for this series. And then we would hope that the SEO from YouTube would continue that long term. And we noticed after a few months that YouTube just wasn't picking up. The views weren't increasing over time. It was kind of doing the exact opposite, unfortunately. And that's when we kind of made the decision, like, okay, let's expand to podcast. Let's create these landing pages. Let's try to get value outside of simply YouTube views from this. And it was definitely a lot more work. It took more resources per each episode, but like seeing that already paying off, some of these older episodes were ranking in keywords like go-to-market challenges and dark social and B2B. And we recorded these like this time last year, and just re-optimizing the landing pages, the titles, the descriptions, have given us this boost, and it's essentially free because it's content that we've already recorded, we already have. And now we're just getting more benefit from it 6, 9, 12 months down the road.
I think that that's also so much of you guys just taking the time to understand where does your audience like consume content. And so you got so much good content from these influencers, but maybe YouTube wasn't going to be like a forever channel, right? Of where like you guys optimize. So I think that's super smart. I mean, I know you guys still use it, so that's very helpful. But yeah, I think that was a very smart strategy to consider, okay, where is the audience really going to be spending most of their time? Where are we going to get picked up? SEO, I mean, I definitely encourage people listening to the episode to go check out Insight Leads podcast page. There, it is very clear that you're using a strong SEO strategy. I know, having been on your Closing Time podcast, just how much work that must be. So how are you trying to find more time? Because you have a pretty quick turnaround, I've noticed as well, from recording an episode to then launching it out. How are you managing your time across all the different deliverables and channels? So is it just you, or do you kind of separate that out a little bit? How's that working at your team?
I will say that it's very beneficial kind of running a one-man band when it comes to post-production of these episodes, because I'm just working on my own schedule. It's my own time management, and I can make sure, we're not waiting on graphic designer to come up with the graphics. We're not waiting on the video editor to edit the video, or our digital marketer to write the descriptions. Like, me being able to do it all myself, I have, my own deadlines and my own timeline, and I can make sure that I get everything done when I need to. And, ideally, we would have 2 episodes a week and we would increase our cadence, but that's just not feasible right now. And it probably never will, unless Closing Time is my one and only job. But it really is just managing my other workload and making sure that I have enough time. I'd say it probably takes me 2 days fully, like 2 full work days per episode. And that's every single part of the Closing Time episode, including editing it and uploading it to the podcast, the whole shebang. But also, ChatGPT has been like my little sidekick when it comes to those episode landing pages. I don't know if I'd be able to do it without it at this point. I probably save close to 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours an episode, not having to take the transcript and directly try to write content from that. I will take the 5 biggest key points from each episode. I'll separate that out from the transcript and I'll put that into ChatGPT, and I'll be like, hey, ChatGPT, this is a transcript. Don't make it sound like a transcript. Make it sound like an excerpt of information about whatever that topic is. And I'll give it a few other directions, like make it sound professional, or, try to shorten it, things like that. And then the output that it gives me is decent enough for me to fluff up, add a little bit of a human element to it. And instead of it taking me probably 3 or 4 hours, it might take me 45 minutes. So that's been a huge, huge time saving for me. It was actually last week, ChatGPT was down and I was like, well, I'll wait until next week to do this.
I remember that. Yeah. I definitely use it for some hacks too. And I'm glad you talked about the prompts, because it's so specific of how you have to give ChatGPT the prompts. Like, it gets better, but there is I've definitely caught ChatGPT and I'm like, that wasn't in the transcript at all. Or I don't know where the hell you got that from. Like, that's not what the article says. And it'll be like, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. It's funny. And it'll end up correcting it. So yeah, it definitely still requires the human element review and input to your point.
Totally.
But yeah, I think this can be really helpful for listeners, which is any content repurposing, or in general, the way you describe how you go about it.
Yeah. And going back to being where your customers are or your ICP is, and having content be able to be consumed in whatever their preferred method is. Now with these episode landing pages and with really content rich landing pages, they can read the content if they want. They really don't even need to watch the episode. We have almost all of the episode transcribed and rewritten on the landing pages. So if somebody does come across the landing page and maybe they just want to do a quick little skim, they can consume the content that way as well, which I think is really beneficial. Personally, sometimes I don't have time to watch a video or listen to a podcast, and I just need the information right then and there. So, I've even gone back to some of these episodes as I'm writing older social posts, or I'm trying to revamp an older episode, and I'll go and reference my own writing, and it's so beneficial.
Absolutely. And so many great tips you just mentioned there about repurposing the content, and whether that's from making yourself more efficient using AI tools like ChatGPT, all the way to repurposing old content. Do you have any more tips or challenges that you overcame and that you can share with our listeners about just turning that initial chunk of content into all of these different channels or different ways to promote it?
Mm-hmm. So I'll also, one thing that I started doing, so if we have an episode where it's like 5 key go-to-market challenges or like a listicle or something like that, I'll take it and I will make a Canva graphic, like a LinkedIn carousel, and I'll say like Todd Capone's 5 biggest takeaways on this topic. And then I can give him the credit for it in the graphic. And that's just like, that's content that Insightly can post on their brand page. We can also map it back to the episode. And a lot of it is evergreen content. So it doesn't really expire. It's still relevant 6-9 months down the road. We can also tag the guests and they can comment and we can boost the post impressions that way. So that's been like a really, it's worked for us really well until LinkedIn changed its algorithm and LinkedIn carousels are no longer working that well. So I'm like, that's a bummer. But until recently, the LinkedIn carousels performed really well. And then I'll also grab some specific quotes or comments that a guest might have made during the episode, and I'll create that into just like a still image graphic on Canva. We have a few closing time templates that our graphic designer helped me come up with, so I can kind of rinse and repeat at my own free will, and I don't really need to ask for help in the moment. And we can, well, post those on Insightly's LinkedIn page as well. And we've also started running some LinkedIn ads with short clips from the episode. So I'll edit, in addition to the social clips for the guest, the host, and Insightly to post, I'll also edit a 30 to 45-second clip, like the most intriguing, engaging, informational piece of content out of the entire episode. And our digital marketing manager will use that on LinkedIn to drive traffic just for the series, either to the landing pages or to our YouTube channel to subscribe. So if you have, Corrina, there's a LinkedIn ad out there with you on it. If you see yourself on LinkedIn, that's why. So we're really trying to get the most out of each episode. I probably get 10 pieces of content per episode, and it's really turned into this like content machine for us.
It definitely has. And I was going to say, bummer on the carousel, because I know that was like such a big win for a while. But
yeah, it really was.
Positive on these new ads that appear as if they're coming from, to your point earlier, the individual that was on the podcast itself. That I think could be a really great new channel or way to utilize LinkedIn as a channel with these episodes. So like when I post about closing time, use my post to then actually go ahead and promote it.
I love that.
Yes. Well,
thank you.
Good. Yeah. And I'll make sure to do that. So going back to I think a lot of, even though you are using audio now, I think so much about what you started with like remains the same, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to make sure that you're highlighting your target audience. You wanted to make sure that it was really considerate of like time. And I definitely think that that's still a consistent theme of the podcast, is that we're not here to just do fluff. We're not here to just do like the same old thing that you've already done and said before. Like we're here to really dial in on 3 to 5 things. And I think that that's probably still missing from a lot of podcasts.
I think to each their own. I mean, sure. I love listening to some podcasts that are an hour and a half long of, people rambling about their day-to-day lives and like what they ate for lunch. There's definitely, that's like the type of podcast I listen to when I'm like vacuuming or something. But like when I'm sitting at my desk and I want to consume something and really learn from it, and video first. I mean, the shorter the better when it comes to video. So that was kind of the initial thought. If we're going to have these video episodes, they need to be like, I mean, we originally were like 10 minutes and then that slowly turned into 15 and that slowly turned into 20 because it's just hard to have even any sort of real authentic conversation with somebody in less than 10 minutes, we've found. But now in a podcast format, at least it is easier to consume and it's really just focused on a niche topic, like straight to the point, and then move on to the next one. But the real goal was like super actionable insights. You know what you're going to get when you read the title. And then in less than 15, 20 minutes, you can hopefully improve your processes or your strategic planning in some way.
And to Corrina's point, what you guys have built has been so actionable and so value heavy. Did you have any challenges at the beginning getting buy-in that, hey, we're not going to talk about our product. We're not going to sell anything. The only reason people are going to tune in is if you are educating and it's snappy and it's valuable. Did you have any challenge convincing people that you should do that?
Just you saying that, it's like, I'm surprised that I did get buy-in as easy as I did here. You put it that way, because if you think about it, I mean, we really are. We're like, hey, we want this employee who we just hired to spend 40% of their work week on this project that is not going to directly drive revenue for the business. And honestly, our CEO ate it up. He was such a fan because it's something that Insightly has never done before. It's something completely new. And he just experimenting and trying new things and failing and learning from them and adapting. Like it's really a part of Insightly marketing team's culture. Most of our team was hired in the last year and a half. And a year and a half ago, before our CMO Chip House joined the team, our CEO actually served as interim CMO for a year until the position was filled. And he actually wrote a great article on Forbes about this, but it really opened his eyes to like the life of a CMO and like the importance of doing different things and trying new things and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And, you know, he operates in a very hands-off approach. He puts so much power in our marketing team hands. And it's great because I feel like, I don't know about you ladies, but I've worked at a few companies where there's so much red tape. It takes like 1 or 2 quarters to get anything done. And it can be really irritating for, you know, the individual contributors who are really trying to like get their work done and make an impact, and like things taking so much time. It really does like put a damper on your morale as an employee. But everything was so quick. Everyone was so like they were like, let's do this. What do you need help from? I think the marketing team was just very excited. We were all just really excited to try something new and see what will happen, see what works. And also like at that point, we were doing maybe one webinar every few months, and we had the occasional blogs that were being posted, but we didn't really have any video. We didn't have any content that was top of funnel. That was like its sole purpose was to just drive brand awareness. And I think that all just played into everyone being all hands on deck. Like, let's do this. Let's see what happens. And honestly, within 2 weeks of me being hired at Insightly, we had our first video uploaded to YouTube. It was pretty crazy. I think my 3rd day, we had a recording session with Todd Capone. So he was like a big part of the beginning of my employment at Insightly.
That's amazing. I love that mentality, that to just let, give the work to the people that have the, expertise, the rigor, the wherewithal to know what to do. And I think that that probably really came from your CEO having to be in a marketer's shoe and being like, wow, filling the top of the funnel is really hard. And that acceptance of like, okay, I'm going to just trust people that are doing this day in and day out to do the job and get the job done. So that's pretty impressive that you were able to get this launched just 2 weeks into starting your new gig. That's amazing.
Yeah. As all very new employees, my manager, Val, she had only been on for a few months. I had been on for a few weeks, and Chip House, our CMO, had only been on for like maybe 6 months at the time. So It was really refreshing, and I'm so grateful for it because like marketing should be an innovative and creative function. And the more red tape and the more delay in making decisions and doing new things just really dampers it.
Absolutely. And just kudos to your whole team for recognizing, particularly you guys being in CRM, that's such a competitive space where there's a couple of really big hitters. So the fact that your CEO, former CMO, interim CMO could recognize the value of the awareness and not box you guys into like a lead-based quantitative model and say like, hey, he could see the long-term vision and like let you guys run with that. That's just uncommon. Well,
absolutely. That's how I knew that. I'm like, this is going to be a good place to work. I'm already a fan.
I think it speaks to how you were able to get those like really big hit metrics with those heavy hitters at the forefront, and then move to more of a model that's a bit more realistic about growth, so that you can also tell that data story of like, hey, this is why, like, we did it with these people with this strategy. It costs this much, to do, but it also is a cost of your time. So now that you have it, where people are really engaged and buying in, you had to adjust the strategy to really make sure that you could still work on this project at all. So did you also feel like when you were telling the difference in data points, like how that changed when you changed that model? Did you run into any challenges of either your CMO or the CEO being like, well, I don't know if this is really worthwhile to keep doing. It's such a different way to look at the podcast. Maybe we just leave this alone or hire somebody externally to do it. Did you have that kind of conversation?
I think it helped that our CSO, Dave Osborne, was one of the hosts. So he was seeing fronthand the conversations that we were having. He was able to suggest guests. We're also helping him kind of start his LinkedIn content creation strategy. And he's starting to post more content on LinkedIn. And he's starting to see the value in being very active and building your network. And which is so good because that just like rains down to the sales team. Like we can't ask our sales teams to be active on LinkedIn and to try to build themselves as thought leaders if their own leaders aren't. So he's been doing a great job this year, starting to just build his LinkedIn following and posting more. So he's seeing like that aspect of it, the value of having these social clips and engaging in conversations on LinkedIn and building those connections, even though they might not result in anything tomorrow, but maybe like 6, 9, 12 months down the road, they'll remember us. And our sales team was also really excited. So us being able to ask them like, hey, who is on LinkedIn that you're consuming content from that you love? Like, who do you think are great thought leaders in our industry? Because really, they're the ones that know our ICP better than I do. So them being excited about it and having that plus our CSO very bought in and having a firsthand hands-on just experience with closing time. I mean, everybody has just been getting more and more excited about it over time. It's like, okay, who's our next guest going to be? We have a guest coming on that we actually interviewed right before we're recording this, that one of our AEs had been having a conversation with a few months ago, and they actually met and they had a great chat about CRM. And he was so excited that we got him on the show. He's like, wait, you got him on the show? And I'm like, yep. He's like, wow. So I think it's just having this very like much so sales and marketing alignment, like sales trust marketing that this is a good idea. Sales is excited about this. And then marketing is executing on it and making sure that sales has input. They're actively involved. I think it's really just like helping essentially our whole go-to-market org be excited and bought into it.
Yes. And you highlighted on such a crucial thing, which is like that conversation flow of like getting that input from your sales team member that goes to you, and then you can highlight them on the show. I mean, it kind of relates back to your earlier magic wand question a bit too, where we're often not thinking about how can we highlight our customers or even people that may one day become our customers. How can we highlight them in a way that's purely a give and not, an ask? And I think that's maybe can relate to what you were talking about earlier is that confidence booster. It doesn't often come, well, I shouldn't say that, but it may not come from your internal team, right? It may not come from your boss. You may be in a situation where there's just high pressure and high stress, and maybe they don't have the management skills, to be thinking about that. Maybe they don't have programs in place with HR for how do you get promoted? How do you level up your career here? So I think I have a couple of thoughts on how we can actually make that confidence booster reality with the magic wand question. Wondering, do you also, after going through this conversation, do you have any thoughts about how you would recommend to your younger self or peers of how you can show that confidence or believe in that confidence booster ahead of time?
I mean, when it comes to like imposter syndrome specifically, the value of a mentor or just anyone above you, more experienced than you in your industry it's so valuable. They're giving you this outside opinion like, hey, you're actually doing good. Like I know what good looks like and you are it. That's a bigger compliment than you'll ever be able to give yourself. And it kind of like, you can't argue against that. You can argue against telling yourself that you're doing good, but you can't argue against somebody that you value and you appreciate and you respect telling you that. So I'd really just say like mentors, and they can also give you career advice and they can help you along this journey of possibly finding a new role or switching careers. I remember my first job out of college, this woman told me, she's like, hey, never take the first offer, always counter offer. It never hurts to counter offer. And my next job, I had like a 5K increase just by asking and countering. And I was like that, if I wouldn't have had her to give me this really solid advice, then I wouldn't have known. So definitely get a mentor if you don't have one already. And LinkedIn is such a great place to find one. And then also just letting go of perfectionism. I am a recovering perfectionist. I always have been. And just, you don't necessarily need to lower the bar or lower your expectations, but just like adjust your standards for success. Give yourself grace. One of our account executives, Tyler Shedron, he posted on LinkedIn recently. He says, failures hang around longer than your greatest triumphs. And that's so true. It's so hard to get over something not going well. So just giving yourself grace and getting back at it and not giving up. Those are probably my biggest tips for people who might be at this like kind of crossroads of, do they want to switch jobs? Do they want to switch careers? They're a little afraid. Yeah, that would be my advice.
I think it's fantastic advice is to just ask, right?
Yeah.
And that can be like as simple as just asking somebody for their time as a mentor, be very clear what you want out of it. But it could also be like, hey, can I get a peer's perspective like on this piece of content I'm writing? Like, let's say they wanted to start, doing more posts on LinkedIn, but they're not confident to do that. Yeah, just ask and just share. And, you'll maybe get some no's and rejections in the process, but keeping stock of that too. Like I have a little smile folder of every time I get something nice that's said about me. That means
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. I recommend getting one. It's digital, so I can just take a snapshot of an email or a snapshot of a Slack thread, or if it's something on social. And because you're right, your triumphs, I forget about them in an instant. And I obsess over the failures. And to your point, it's just, there is no perfection. Like there is no end goal where that's ever going to happen. So it's best to just let that go. Take stock of what you maybe did learn, but don't let it prevent you from continuing to seek support, advice, or help, because that confidence booster will come into play and you'll find your tribe that's going to keep promoting you. And Chip is definitely one of those people who just sings your praises like in front of you and behind you. So it's just amazing that you have found this space because, I think just that's what most people are longing for, is to just be seen, feel appreciated. And that's a huge part of why we did this podcast, is because we didn't want to see all the big names that, maybe are on the constant podcast rotation. We wanted to see people like you, Courtney, who are doing incredible work, and you are bringing so much value. I mean, you are like, there's such a well-rounded marketer. We clearly realized that you could talk about literally any subject in marketing. So kudos to you. I hope you take this as a bit of a confidence booster that, we quickly saw the value and what you could share with our listeners and with us too. And we value your insights greatly. So thank you for taking the time today to share with us.
I appreciate that more than you know. And I absolutely love your podcast for that reason. When I was asked to be on, I was like, why? Like, and then Chip was like, well, it's meant for individual contributors. And I'm like, okay, that's unique. It's very different than any other podcast. And I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that, people who are listening to this, they can share this with their friends and their coworkers who may be in a similar situation and just feel like you can do it.
Yes, thank you. That means so much to us, that it resonates, that it feels unique, and that that's what we're here for at the end of the day. I think our metric is, or I'll speak for both of us today, but I think our metric is if one person leaves feeling, after being interviewed on our podcast, better about themselves and their capabilities, then we've done our job. That's the metric we care about. Yeah.
Love that. That's the best metric.
Well, thank you again so much for being on the show today and all the incredible insights that you've provided to all of our listeners. I can't wait to get this episode out for them to hear all of the fantastic tips that you gave.
Thanks so much, Taylor and Corrina.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks for listening to this episode of Direct with Corrina and Taylor.
If you enjoyed what you heard in today's episode, please give us a follow, maybe even a 5-star review, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you know someone that you'd like to spotlight, if you want to share your own story, visit us at motionagency.io/direct. We'd love to hear from you.